So there was something stated in a recent Jujutsu Kaisen chapter that kind of got people in a frenzy. It's been 2 weeks since then and we've had a break week, so I think it's kind of calmed down now a bit since I haven't really seen anyone talking about it lately. But the statement made by Uraume to Hikari back in chapter 252 was very interesting and got people up in arms. The statement in question is when Uraume states that Sukuna isn't taking the fight seriously, or in another translation that he just hasn't gone all out yet. Now regardless of which translation you find to be more accurate, the end result of what was said here stays the same. Hikari feels confident and brags a little bit about how it looks like they're doing fine against Sukuna since his cursed energy is dipping, and Uraume states that Sukuna is capricious and unpredictable and his cursed energy really wavers based on his mood, so it can fluctuate up or down depending on if he's really enjoying the fight and it's intense or if he's just playing around or bored. Uraume even goes so far as to say that they should be ashamed for not presenting a fighter better than Gojo, which I thought was funny and kind of crazy since Gojo sent Uraume flying down an alley, but other than that, I'd say under normal circumstances, they would be the ones to know. In this video, I'll be talking about the statement made by Uraume shortly, and also going over the ways that Sukuna has fought each of his opponents, or at least the fights I feel are worth mentioning to talk about how he's always held back. But before I jump into that, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It's the easiest way to support the channel, and I'll be picking my favorite comments to add to my community tab as comments of the week, kind of like my guy Shon and OG be doing. But enough of that, let's get back to the video. Like I said, if there was anyone who would know the most about Sukuna's mood swings and fluctuations and cursed energy, it would definitely be Uraume, but in this case I think that what they said should be taken with several grains of salt. The reason I say this is because last time Uraume was seen remotely anywhere close to Sukuna was right as Kashima was making his way to the battlefield, and during that time it stated that Kashima was about 200 or so meters off the ground, and when he looks up you can see Uraume's iceberg that then deployed Sukuna's curse tool Kamatoke. After this we immediately witness Sukuna fight Kashimo, and then Yuji and Ko show up and they take the fight far away from where it was, and they leave Uraume, who is being held off by Hikari. A lot is happening at that time, and never once do we see Uraume and Hikari making any ground towards where Sukuna is located, and I highly doubt that Sukuna and Uraume have like walkie-talkies or anything, so there's been no way for them to communicate what's happened. Uraume though and Hikari can both feel Sukuna's energy levels raising and falling as it happens, but neither of them has the knowledge about the things that has happened, such as Sukuna losing Kamatoke. Hell, at the start of chapter 245, Uraume even thinks to themselves, I got separated from Sukuna. Since then, Sukuna has been putting on quite a show, but he's also been hit with things that Uraume just has no way of knowing, like having one of his hands basically killed temporarily by Higuruma's executioner sword, getting caught inside Yuta's domain and hit with several techniques including his own cleave and Angel's Jacob ladder. Although Jacob's ladder is an interesting one because I think normally someone would be able to see that from afar, but I don't know how that appears from inside the domain, and other than that, he's taken multiple punches from Yuji, including one that actually let Yuji enter a metaphysical space and speak with Megami. That last form of major damage that Sukuna took before Uraume's statement was a sneak attack from Maki using the Soul Split Katana, backstabbing him through the heart, now making it so that he has to literally keep his blood pumping with cursed energy. Quick little thing I noticed here is that this is the second time Sukuna has had to fight without a heart, and both times were against Zenin. Also, as of chapter 215, Yuji and Megami have both fought against Sukuna while he was in the other person's body. Megami fought Sukuna early on in the series while he was still inside of Yuji. But all that to say is that even though Uraume, the ultimate Sukuna fanboy, is right about how Sukuna normally acts, we are now seeing a slightly different Sukuna, and Uraume has no idea how severe the damage is that's stacked up. Because like I said, it's not that they're fighting across the street. All they have to go off of is, the knowledge of Sukuna's ways. With that out of the way, I wanted to also briefly talk about how Sukuna has fought many of his opponents and how he has never truly went all out. I'd like to point out in all of his fights, he ends up either telling someone something about themselves or basically fighting in a way that normally could be seen as fighting with a hand behind your back. In the first fight against Gojo, when Yuji first eats the finger and Sukuna takes over, it's his first time and who knows how long that he's been free and able to stretch his legs, so he only has one finger worth of cursed energy reserves, and so he ends up fighting Gojo with only a 10-second duration. And during this fight, he's made a fool of, really. Gojo toys with him while Sukuna acts more like a wild animal, not knowing what or how Gojo's technique works, and then the time limit runs out and he comes to find out that Gojo is the strongest in his era and makes a promise that he will kill Gojo one day. A little later on, Sukuna fights Megami for another short moment, and it starts off with just toying with Megami, and he notices that Fushiguro's techniques are more than just simple Shikigami summoning. He compliments on how they could be used in many ways and sees the potential in Megami, asking why he ran away from the fight earlier with the finger bearer. This fight is the start of Sukuna's long plan to steal Megami's body, and the next time we really see Sukuna fight is against Jogo in the Shibuya incident, and this fight is really where you first get to see Sukuna shine brightly. Jogo has just given Sukuna 10 fingers, and when asked by Sukuna what he wants in return, he says nothing. The goal of the cursed spirits was simply to revive Sukuna, and beyond that he has no specific goal. Jogo does suggest to Sukuna Sukuna that he uses one of Yuji's friends as leverage to force a binding vow so that he can keep control of the body, and Sukuna instead offers a wager, saying if Jogo can land a single attack on him, that he will do whatever he and his silly gang wants, and he'll start by killing every single person in Shibuya, something that we know is entirely possible. During this fight, we watch Sukuna dance all over Jogo without letting him ever get an attack off, and these scenes were extended to an incredible degree in the anime, something any fan will appreciate greatly. But in the end, Sukuna asks Jogo why he doesn't use his domain, and Jogo tells him it's because he knows he would lose, and Sukuna calls him a loser for thinking that way and finishes him off with an arrow made of flames, basically using his own technique against him, which we still to this day don't understand the mechanics of. But afterward, Jogo appears in a afterlife or mental space type of area with the other curses that have died, and Sukuna also appears here, telling Jogo that his shortcomings were in his confidence and grouping up with others, which led to comparing himself to those others and stunting his own growth. He tells Jogo he should have strived for more and burned everything to the ground to make himself stronger so that he could be on the level of someone like Gojo, but in the end he does compliment Jogo for being strong for what he was able to achieve this way. For a long time I personally thought that Sukuna being here was just Jogo's imagination, but it's later confirmed in the current arc that Sukuna himself remembers it too, so that means that these weren't a hallucination or like an angel telling Jogo what he wanted to hear before death. These were Sukuna's genuine thoughts on Jogo. After defeating Jogo, Sukuna fights with Maharaga and learns about how it can adapt to all sorts of attacks. After a while going back and forth, he puts an end to Maharaga using domain expansion as well as launching another fire arrow to end it completely, and this really solidifies Sukuna's plans for later. In a way, this fight for Sukuna wasn't test driving the car before you buy it, but maybe more like he was looking at people drive the car he wants to buy on YouTube. He was seeing all the specs and tricks Maharaga had in his bag, and then he wiped it out, saving Megami in the process and further showing his interest in him. It's a long time before we see another fight with Sukuna. The next time is after he uses Enchain, something we have been waiting years for, and he gambles on this chance to swap bodies to Megami, and after that, he immediately sends Yuji flying several blocks away and uses an enhanced Nue to rain down lightning below on Takaba and Maki. While he's having fun in his new body and new tricks, he's caught off guard as Angel surprises him, blasting Sukuna with her curse technique, but because of her love for Megami, she is blinded by that love and foolishly falls for Sukuna's tricks, which I think will be really interesting to see animated because, like, did Sukuna's voice change here, or were like the tattoos fading or something? It's kind of hard to tell with how time passes in manga paneling, but either way, she is quickly trashed, and Sukuna rips off her arm and just chucks her off a building. Not sure why he didn't think to finish her off, but maybe he thought the fall damage and the damage from ripping her arm off her body would kill her, but she survives till later. After Angel, Sukuna fights Yuji, and like I said, Yuji is now fighting Sukuna in Megami's body, and that's a cool little detail, but I'd say it's less of a case this time that Sukuna is holding back and more that Megami was holding Sukuna back here. But we really get to see more of how Sukuna thinks in this fight. He basically compares himself to a calamity, letting Yuji know that the weak have no right to complain about being killed. After they exchange a few blows, Maki shows up and Sukuna plays with them a little, but he recognizes Maki as more of an actual threat since she shows up unscathed by Nue, as well as being able to take several of his blows and keep on dishing out attacks of her own despite being someone without a curse technique. You can see Sukuna's mood switch when he's fighting with Maki from someone having fun to fighting Yuji, and suddenly he's just bored and he hates this. This fight is interrupted by Uraume, and Sukuna says that they made the right call to focus freezing Maki more, and we learn that Sukuna needs to prepare more in order for his body to be more of his own without Megami being able to do things like lowering his cursed output. After sinking Megami's soul in literal darkness and cursed energy, he prepares to take this body on a true test run and hammer in that final nail by killing Megami's sister. On the way over, he runs into Ryu Ishigori, who he cleaved once but underestimates Ishigori's toughness, so when he didn't die, Sukuna paid him respect, giving him one more to finish the job. Sukuna later thinks of him in terms of toughness and output needed to slash someone as tough as him. Immediately after facing Ishigori, Sukuna faces off against Yorozu, who is another incarnated sorcerer in the body of Megami's sister. These two face off in a coliseum, and this is one of the best examples of Sukuna holding back to me. Throughout this entire battle, Sukuna refuses to use his own technique. Remember earlier when I said him fighting Maharaga in Shibuya was like watching car videos on YouTube? But this fight is the actual test drive. He has the car now. During this fight, we see Sukuna use the 10 Shadows technique over and over, which enraged Yorozu, and in turn provided for more entertainment for Sukuna himself, laughing at her when she mentioned things like love and even saying she could do whatever she wanted with his body if she killed him, but of course the 10 Shadows was far too much for her to handle. Without ever using his cleave, dismantle, or even malevolent shrine, which Yorozu personally asked for, Sukuna took down Yorozu after whipping out multiple Shikigami from the 10 Shadows technique, including ones we had yet to see from Megami himself, in the end finishing her off with Maharaga. This fight was great for showing how someone fully prepared to face off against Sukuna himself, knowing exactly what he's capable of, wasn't nearly enough to force Sukuna's hand. Every fight is done his way. The next fight is the most important of the series so far, and there is a lot of back and forth about the specifics that went on during this fight. One of the biggest things, again, being Uraume's statement saying that Sukuna hasn't given it his all. Many people saw this and were quick to call BS or post memes, like Gojo punching Sukuna with the Black Flash, and Gojo fans in general were just upset, saying that it's just Gege glazing Sukuna, but the same has happened for Gojo all throughout the story. It only makes sense that Sukuna gets the same treatment sometimes. I personally look at this fight in a few ways, one being that Sukuna never actually saw the process to create the first Hollow Purple, which tore through the city and hit him to begin the fight, and that was enhanced by 200% thanks to chanting from Gojo, as well as the ritualistic curse techniques combined from Gakuganji and Urahime, pushing him well beyond the normal levels. Sukuna was aware that purple was bad news and knew that it was beyond 120%, but he didn't know the specifics and probably figured he could either prevent another one like that first from happening, or in the case where people say Sukuna was worried, I think that's just because he had only seen purple once as a reference. Sukuna himself knows that if he got hit with that big one again, it would be major, and knowing that Gojo would be going for that again would cause panic. But I want to talk about the way Sukuna fought for that entire battle. I want to think of Sukuna's POV as one basically trying to level up a pet, or kind of like in Pokemon, he's basically using Maharaga to fight in a way kind of like how you would evolve an Eevee into an Espeon or something. He's being very specific about how he fights here. The entire time his goal was to adapt Maharaga to Gojo's techniques, mainly so in the end that he can gain the ability to cut space. But I think there was also a part of it where he wanted to just outdo Gojo and prove to him who was the best, as well as show how hopeless the situation was to Gojo's friends. Sukuna basically fought while also trying to weave Maharaga in to take blows and eat reds and punches infused with infinity so that Gojo would eventually be left with nothing. Sukuna shows off his domain being superior in that he can basically nullify Unlimited Void by touching Gojo within it, while his own domain attacks Unlimited Void from outside, and Gojo takes a lot more damage over the course of the battle, including a surprise slash from Maharaga, which I believe Gojo was unable to see since it cut his arm off. One of these things are sometimes hard to tell, like this slash, it's like, did he see it? In the end, Sukuna does misjudge a purple, which severely damages him, and the people looking on at the fight believe that Gojo has won, but at the same time, Maharaga has finally completed its adaptation process, giving Sukuna the ability to cut space itself, and uses that to finish off Gojo. Sukuna goes on to explain his process for the entire fight and how long and tedious it was to have Maharaga adapt to his abilities, and there are people sour about how this fight ended. Again, Sukuna fought his way. He only used what he wanted to use in this fight and still kept things in reserve because he knew once he defeated Gojo that more people would jump in to fight him immediately. And instantly Sukuna is met with Kashimo, someone who has laid waste to all of his opponents in the past and taken Kenjaku's offer to join the game of death so that 400 years later he could fight against the strongest sorcerer in history in hopes of understanding and defeating him. Kashimo puts up a great fight while also asking Sukuna how he became the strongest and what it's like to be at the top. How does it feel to have no equal? How can you ever show kindness to those you know are below you? Sukuna decides to give Kashimo what he wants, a death befitting of a warrior, taking on his true form to restore his body. Now with 4 arms, an extra mouth on his stomach, and a weird faceplate thing with all 4 of his eyes bulging out of his head and watching every direction, Sukuna focuses his strongest dismantles at Kashimo, advising him to dodge if he can. Of course, he is unable to, and this marks the end of Kashimo, once again taking us to this afterlife space similar to Jogo's from before, where Sukuna commends them for being strong and telling them that they had it all wrong all along. Sukuna tells Kashimo that he understands how his strength led to him being alone and that solitude bothers him. It seems as though Kashimo wished for an equal maybe, and Sukuna tells him that love is useless. All he wants to do is fight, kill, and do as he pleases until the day he dies. From here on, Sukuna faces off against multiple fighters at once, while his initial focus is on Higuruma, who he isolates from the group, and after removing his limbs, Sukuna gives him a chance to heal himself with the reverse curse technique, and Higuruma achieves this feat. Sukuna is excited and pleased to fight with Higuruma, and even shuts him up inside his domain so that he can hurry up and see if the good guys can take him down, even with a sword capable of killing in one shot. In the end, Sukuna again is the victor, supposedly killing Higuruma, but not after giving him his praise and comparing him to Gojo. We don't know if Higuruma is truly dead, since Uri is removing dead or wounded people from the battlefield to possibly be healed by Shoko. Sukuna knows this as well, but we haven't seen what that situation looks like. Beyond that, we reach the current fight, which mostly consists of Yuji, Yuta, Kusakabe, Ino, Choso, and Maki. Sukuna Sukuna even praises them for surviving whenever he attacks them, and Kusakabe even thinks to himself how they're in trouble if a few things happen, especially if Sukuna uses the fire arrow, which he hasn't used at all for some reason. Sukuna does put a few of the fighters in timeout, and it comes down to mainly Yuta and Yuji for a few chapters. During this fight, it's not that Sukuna is holding back exactly, even though there are things he is still yet to do, like the fire arrow or use his other weapon that we know he has used in the past, but here Sukuna is basically seeing what Jujutsu High can do. After a month to train and get ready, he wants to see how strong they've gotten, and it makes sense. Sukuna is a master of Jujutsu. He lives and breathes this, and seeing new techniques excite him, and also cause him to have a brief moment where he leaves himself open while he tries to figure out how the technique works for the first time. Sukuna lets Yuta know that everyone he cares about will die if they don't defeat him. Their battle goes through a series of exchanges with characters like Yuta fully aware that they are basically on a timer. Ever since the battle with Gojo, Sukuna has been regaining his cursed energy so that he can once again use his domain expansion, and most of this fight shows Sukuna demonstrating his defenses. He throws out a few slashes here and there, but Yuta eventually opens up his own domain, forcing Sukuna to take a defensive stance for Hollow Wicker Basket, and basically is stalling while he endures the damage done to him by Yuta and Yuji. Yuji, who is now capable of attacking the soul and using some blood technique, slowly whittles away at Sukuna with an exploding blood technique, as well as rapid punches weakening the soul. Sukuna fights off Yuta, Yuji, and Rika as they punch, kick, slash, and even rip out the tongue in his stomach while holding his limbs down so that Sukuna is forced to keep that defense. But even in this, it's just entertainment for Sukuna. Sukuna is definitely the type of character who I could see as basically someone playing a fighting game, and because he's so confident in his skills, he would be willing to fight any opponent from 1 HP if he had something he wanted to do or prove. Seemingly, Sukuna breaks the domain by world-cutting Yuta and Yuji forcing the barrier to break, but it's revealed later that this was all part of the plan, and one of the very few times Sukuna is caught off guard happens again. When the barrier breaks, Sukuna poses, confident and reveling in his victory as Maki's sword comes piercing his heart. When Maki arrives, Yuta and Yuji end up away from the fight momentarily while Maki faces off against Sukuna. She continues to impress him. After their last fight, he was impressed with fighting Maki. It's revealed that he's fighting with his heart damaged and he's just pumping blood with curse technique, and here is where we circle back to Uraume's statement that Sukuna has been holding back this entire time. Like I said before, they have no way of knowing the current situation and all of the damage he's taken, but now that he is facing Maki truly in a one-on-one, Sukuna has realized that she basically spits in the face of everything he stands for, and now Sukuna finally feels like he has a goal, something to prove for real. Maki, in a way, I guess the best example I could use is sort of like Asta in this case from Black Clover, someone who has none of the supernatural energy from the verse, and all of her power comes from her body, which is abnormally strong due to heavenly restriction, and she's facing off against basically the strongest wizard to ever exist. Sukuna at this point wrote the book of Jujutsu and constantly studies it to improve his craft and is fascinated by it. His entire life is revolved around using it to do as he pleases and being the greatest. He's the star player, and now he's faced by someone who is able to stand on equal footing without any of the energy or techniques that Sukuna has spent his life cultivating. This very thought of her existence pleases Sukuna to no end because he can now answer a new question that's never been asked before, and for the first time Sukuna is so focused, so locked into the fight that he stops healing to throw hands with Maki and lands his first ever on-screen Black Flash. People asked why Sukuna never hit a Black Flash versus Gojo, and I think the answer is simple. He was never locked in the way he is now. During that fight with Gojo, he was basically on pet management duty the entire time and just focused on winning in a certain way. Like I said, in none of these fights has Sukuna ever used his full bag. In each fight, he faced his opponent how he wanted to unless he had no control over it, like in this recent fight, due to him just not being able to cast his domain. He beat Jogo with his own fire, Yorozu without ever using his own technique, Gojo while making sure his pet never died so that he can hit him with this very specific move, and for the first time, Sukuna is fighting without anything on his mind besides besting the opponent. At the time of this video, Kusakabe is staring down at Sukuna and wishing he can run away, but like I said multiple times before, even though people don't like it, Uraume's statement is both true and false. Sukuna so far has never been forced to use everything in his arsenal, but for the first time in hundreds of years, he may be about to do just that now that Maki has brought the dog out of him, and he has taken on multitudes of damage that Uraume couldn't possibly know. I feel like this video went on for a long time, so if you could, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I'd appreciate it if you did, and leave a comment letting me know your thoughts. Thanks for watching and have a good day.